Good morning, good morning, good morning. Summer? Right? No. You remind me.
Summer's not here.
Okay.
She's just a student.
We're well in the winter already. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I know we're a little bit off kilter here with time. I apologize for that. And so because we have lots of guests who haven't been here before or who haven't been here for a while, just a quick reminder that we have a deposit on this room, which is $50. And so if you can come up with a buck or two and put it over here on this table, that would be awesome. That also serves as your gratuity, so please don't think you need to do both, okay? So that deposit kind of sort of covers the gratuity and the wear and tear on the room and all those things. And as you're getting more food, because we have a couple minutes yet, but we're going to be closing doors here in a few minutes. As you're getting more food, by all means do that. And Irma is our replacement, and she's doing a good job this morning. Ronnie, by the way, is out with back surgery, and so that's why she's not with us this morning. As we came in this morning, and this is really for the committee who's taking over from us, just a reminder to touch base with Tasha at the front, and that's totally up to you how you do that. But we did share with her this morning that the activity is continuing, but that Craig and I are no longer in charge of it after today. And so, committee, that's just, okay. And Tasha is the young lady of color at the front. So, questions there?
Where is Tasha?
Tasha is the woman who works here. So, she's the one who helps to make sure that the room is continually reserved for us. And committee may not be planning that, I don't know, but just extending that into your lap, that's it. So, all right, Drea.
I was just saying, I think they are planning on continuing.
Gotcha. Announcements, because we're kind of out of the loop.
I think right now we're just closing the end of the year. We
For those of you who may not know, this is Drea Parker. She's the president, executive director. What's the official title? It's chair of Interfaith Winston-Salem.
Okay, so yeah. Okay, so all right. Good morning, y'all. Okay, so for December, we've still got Conversations, and we have Sita Samara presenting at Conversations the third Monday, which is Monday a week, I do believe. Bear with me, I've been working all night at the overflow shelter. I haven't had any sleep. So Sita Samara will be presenting. The topic is the feminine in Hinduism. So do come to Temple Emmanuel the third Monday, 7 p.m. For Conversations based on Sita Samara's feminine in Hinduism. And then in January, do we know who's presenting for Journeys in January? Do you remember? No? Okay.
One of the sessions is Alan Williams, who is
Is he in January?
Yeah, on board.
Okay, yeah, all right.
I'm gonna
So
grab
Alan
that
Williams,
leg and pull it out.
atheist,
Gabriel,
will
do you
be
mind?
presenting in
Pull it out.
January.
Pull it.
I do know that for
Pull the leg. There you
January's
go. Thank you.
Conversations, we have Shadi Kassim presenting for Conversations, and we'll have more on that in January. But other than that,
January 10th, book club, the Interfaith Alternative.
the Interfaith Alternative, January 10th for the book club, and that's Highland Presbyterian. Anybody else? Any other announcements? I think.
What is the time?
What is the time?
6:30.
6:30 p.m. Okay. I think we're good.
Okay.
You can't leave.
Thank you. It's nice to have such a good group here this morning, and it's wonderful to have, go ahead, honey, 1, 2, up. Okay. representatives from our current faith community, and for those of you who have been veterans here for years, they kind of sat together, and you know what, I'm going to say this because I feel it needs to be said, but that's probably my greatest regret. With the 3 years that we have done this, that we don't expand our circle of friends on Sunday mornings when we come here. We tend to sit by the same people. Some of you are fabulous at seeking out new folks, and I can't share with you enough how interfaith is about exploring, and that's why we do breakfast, and that's why we have community time. And so now the teacher has reprimanded you, so we'll move on. But I think you understand where I'm coming from, and I'm seeing some nods of understanding, and I appreciate that. Craig, let's see what you sound like. Talk, honey. Just say something.
Merry Christmas.
Did you hear him? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So Irma's going to come in periodically with coffee, and just let her know, because she's not as used to working with our group. So if you see her come in, but don't be afraid, please, to acknowledge her that you need some attention.
Let me know,
So-
everybody, okay?
Thank you, Irma.
Merry Christmas.
So we are starting, and let us know sound-wise too, because I know my voice carries much differently than Craig's does. And so we're going to be taking you down a little bit of a path here, and Craig's going to start this morning. We're going to share with you kind of like our childhood, and then adulthood, and then the infamous accident, and then we'll go from there. Okay, Craig, tell them about your childhood, please.
Well, I was born and raised here in North Carolina. I was, my first time remembering church is when Mom used to gather us like little hens or chicks and get us together. We would walk up the road for about a fourth of a mile to the Little Fellowship Baptist Church. That's where I started church. And that church was given to my Aunt Lucy, who had the property. She had a church built there and everything. And her son, Colby, was the preacher there. And that's where I was baptized. And my sister and I used to sing in the church. Imagine that.
So, raised Southern Baptist.
Just Baptist.
Just Baptist.
Just Baptist. Southern.
Okay, just Baptist. Okay. That's the real Baptist. Okay. So, contrary to that, I was baptized as a Roman Catholic, and I'm a second-generation German. All four of my grandparents immigrated from Germany. The roles in our family was that my mother was the organist and choir director for 40 years, and wonderful musician. And I remember being a little boy and going into the rectory in the Catholic Church. You have a rectory, the parish house, where the priest lives. And I remember my mother being embarrassed to ask for the full $1 that she got paid for every Sunday and feast day. And she would usually find a way to, if it was 52, she'd say, well, 50 would be enough, or whatever. And so I began as an altar boy, of course, once you're old enough to do that, and moved into the choir at a fairly early age, as soon as evidently my mother felt that my voice had changed enough so I could sing the tenor line as opposed to the soprano line. And my baptism was indeed as a child. And we have been involved with several different faith communities where it has been suggested about being baptized or born again and all of that. And that's not negotiable for Michael. I was baptized, it took, okay? And my parents, for what they did well and what they didn't do so well, determined that that was what we did. And I will not, I'll walk away if you insist on something like that. adulthood.
And on that note, Michael was Catholic, but I am one of 14 children. 14! And I have a twin. So I'm a twin.
So it defies the whole Catholics have the big families. Because there were only 5 of us. Your adulthood.
So when we left Faith Baptist Church, I started thinking other churches was gay friendly, and then we got to St. Mary's in Greensboro. So that's where we started out. And I went to St. Mary's for quite several years, and then it started falling apart, and then it started going separate ways, and then we started a church here in Winston-Salem, MCC in Winston-Salem, and I'm one of the charter members for that.
And MCC, for those of you who may not be as familiar, is Metropolitan Community Church, and begun by a man and a group of 10, I think, who felt that there needed to be a faith community that really spoke to, addressed the gay, lesbian, trans, bi, etc., etc. And so really came into being not terribly long ago, in the 70s. Anybody here that can help me remember my MCC history? It's not an old denomination by any means, but that's what Craig's talking about, MCC. What else? Okay.
So I was born and raised in North Carolina, and then, like I said, and I went with a former partner from North Carolina to Kansas, and that's where I met Michael.
Did you stay involved in MCC up there?
Yes, we did. It was an MCC in Kansas as well. We were in Kansas City. There was the MCC in Kansas City, and Michael was in Wichita, and there was the MCC in Wichita. We got together. We went to Wichita then, the MCC.
So MCCs were certainly very much a part of every state, not necessarily every community. And so people, the gay community certainly had to do some traveling if they wanted to participate in those faith traditions. So as an adult, I was certainly questioning, not necessarily God, not a supreme being, but just questioning, trying to understand some of the human-made rules of the Catholic Church. And of course, my poor mother didn't really appreciate that. And we would come to blows over that over the course of time. And because there's a big difference between questioning something and I really feel that she was perceiving that I was not going to believe anymore, that I was going to be another fallen away Catholic like some of my siblings. I'm the youngest. And so I can imagine that that was extremely stressful for her. But it wasn't because I didn't believe, it's just that the rules, some of the rules just didn't quite. I remember my mother and I were on our way back to her apartment from somewhere, it doesn't matter. And I remember us talking about the Immaculate Conception. And for those of you who know somewhat about that, that of course has to do with Jesus' birth mother, and also the fact that it was her conception that was immaculate, not the conception of him. And people get confused about that a lot, I think, when they think about the Catholic Church. And so I said something to the effect of, well, you have to admit, Mom, that that's a pretty weird thing. And so, and I was somewhere in my 20s at the time. And it was like, oh my goodness, if she could have stopped the wheels on the car, that would have been okay. Because, again, you don't question that. That's just the way it is, damn it. And so, but for people who don't believe, it's a really hard concept to believe. Because our logical minds want to problem solve it, want to make sense out of it. So even though I was questioning, I was still committed to the Catholic Church. There were times when I didn't go, but I always went back. And for a stint of 3 years, back in the late 80s, I spent 12 to 15 hours a weekend at St. Mary's Catholic Church in Salina, Kansas. I was the cantor. We did 6 masses on a weekend. You know, with the Catholic Church, you don't have to go to church on a particular day. You can do it in another day as well. So Saturday night I would go and I would meet with my organist and we would rehearse and then we'd do mass. And Sunday morning I was back there at 7 o'clock to do another rehearsal, to do the 8 o'clock mass. And then I stayed and did another rehearsal and another mass because of course every mass had a different organist. And they always wanted to rehearse. And you were the song leader. I mean, you really needed to know that this was one that liked to do everything like the dirge. This was one that, woo, we know, go all over. So, you know, you had to have some rehearsal. And that was all volunteer. But at the time, that was very fulfilling for me. And so I stayed very active with that. Once I found MCC of Wichita, I was still very involved there. Directed a show to raise money, which the preacher person blew in one fell swoop, but we don't need to go into that. Would do fundraisers with dinners, and because, you know, gay men stereotypically know how to cook, and so there were about 6 of us who would put on fundraising dinners. And so it was great fun and it was fulfilling. And it was very eye-opening to me to find a church that wasn't Catholic, that spoke to churchy type stuff, if you will, and that really geared itself toward the gay community and of course all the problems that come with that you can probably guess. So that brings us to the accident, and we're going to just kind of quickly tell you so that you understand the gravity of that accident, because I think that all the things that happened after that will have a little more understanding. We assume Craig fell asleep. He was on a freeway coming from Kansas City to Wichita. He went into the median. He was driving a Ford Ranger. He came back up onto the freeway and he flipped end over end 4 times. He landed upright. At that point, there was not a light or a wheel left on it was 2:30 in the morning, and it was on the crest of a hill and a curve, and 3 cars coming over there going 75 miles an hour, the speed limit out in the Midwest is higher than it is here, hit him and would spin him around differently each time, and then progressively go into their own ditches. No one else was injured. The driver of one of the vehicles was a very pregnant lady, and she did deliver that weekend with a premature baby, but everything was fine. Craig was in a coma for a month. He was in the hospital 1 week short of 4 months, and the reason that he could come home, it was September 1st, by the way, Labor Day weekend of 2001. We have no recollection of 9/11. Absolutely none, because of course, first of all, Craig was asleep, and I was, and so, busy, that's right. So Craig was, and the reason he could come home on December 20th, even though the doctor had said it would be early January, was because I was teaching. I was going to be off the next 2 weeks from school, and so I could bring him home. Traumatic brain injury. The optic nerves were destroyed in the accident, and that's why he's blind. His jaw was broken in 4 places. Extensive dental problems, but unless I showed you where his incisions are on his face, you would not know that. His elbow was in 14 pieces, and it had to be removed, and that's why it's just fused. Ribs were broken. We've had a Greenfield filter put in on day 2 to help in case of blood clots. His left hip was broken, and because it healed while he was in a coma, as opposed to those of you who have had hip replacements, and you're out of the bed in about, what, 2.3 hours? And begin therapy. His was immobile for a month. And when he did wake up, the last thing they were worried about was getting any exercise. And that's why Craig walks the way he walks, simply because that's the way it healed. Okay? So I think that was it, right? Yeah, just a few things. So, all right. And so that gives you an idea of the accident. Okay? And almost immediately, what happened, Craig, when you woke up? What are some of the things you thought and said?
Who turned the lights out?
Because indeed, you opened your eyes, but there was nothing to see.
Yeah.
And what else about?
I thought, I reckon God did me this way, so I'm on a different journey than I was in the future. So this is my journey now.
And never once did we hear from Craig, why me? How come it happened to me? Well, gosh darn it, and why didn't I just die? Nothing. Never once did we ever hear anything like that. So that brings us to the faith journey as it applies, I guess, to the stay in the hospital. And it was MCC of Kansas City that rose to the occasion. The preacher people, in addition to the people of the faith community. They were visiting Craig in the hospital. Many times he didn't know or remember because he was just too sick. But they were visiting. And the preacher people were involved. And he had only been, how long had you been at that church, do you think?
Probably 6 months to a year.
Okay, so it's not like he'd been there for 10 years and had some real stake in the community. One of the congregants from MCC of Kansas City let me use his apartment every weekend because the way that it worked was that every weekend I went to Kansas City to the hospital. And so Preston vacated his apartment, went over to his partners. They weren't cohabitating at the time. And so I had a bed and I had a shower and it was unbelievable. And the people of the Wichita, the people, not the preacher, the people of Wichita really rose as well. My principal allowed me that on Wednesdays, I could have my students outside in the hallway with my classroom door locked when the bell rang. And I was the first one, I'm sorry, out the door. I hopped in the car, I picked up one of the people from the church, and we drove the 212 miles to the hospital, and then had a couple hours, and then they would drive back, which was a godsend, because at least, I didn't sleep, but at least I didn't have to be driving. And so those folks were wonderful. MCC of Kansas City made sure that the people in North Carolina were aware of Craig and kept communication lines open. And that was really nice. People were doing church. People were doing church. And so they sent the prayers. So Craig came home. I went back to school in January. We had paid help all day. Craig could not, where he was put, he was. He could not do anything. And so we had paid help by day. And then the people of the Wichita church would come back in the evening because, of course, when you're direct plays, you have to go back in the evening and you have to have rehearsals and set building. And so they came and spent the evenings with Craig, which helped us financially tremendously. And Uncle Norm became Craig's take him to the dentist. And Uncle Norm enjoyed it because Dr. Craig was, of course, a cutie. And the dental place loved Craig. The dental hygienists and the people involved there would argue over who got to take care of him each time he would come because we had to have so much work done. So Uncle Fred loaned us a van because in the beginning, we didn't even know how we were going to get Craig around because he came home in a Bledsoe, and if you've ever had a Bledsoe on, it goes from your crotch down through your ankle. And so he had this board as well. And so he loaned us his van until we were able to get a vehicle that was going to work for Craig.
And that was the wheelchair.
Yeah, in a wheelchair, of course. And so we had people who were just tremendous. When we got to the church, which was an old-fashioned, 14 steps up on the outside, and if you know anything about Wichita, about Kansas, there is winter out there. And 4 people would come and grab the wheelchair and carry Craig up so that he could participate. The preacher person, on the other hand, was a detriment to society, and certainly worked everything she could against us. She hated me because we had butted heads, I can't imagine. And so, because she hated me, she took it out on Craig as well. And it's not my job to, but isn't it sad how that affects people very much, very much. So, we're going to move past that. So we're moving to North Carolina because Craig's family felt that he needed to be home. And so we're now here.
Our house Craig friendly.
That's right. What about MCC?
So we got MCC here in Winston. We came back to MCC here. And then we were kicked out. We thought, where do we go now? So we went to Peace Haven Baptist Church again. Baptist.
Well, I don't know that we were kicked out, but as many churches, there's divide and conquer, there's butting of heads, there's a parting of the ways, however you want to say that. And we experienced in the course of our time at MCC another interesting phenomena, I think, of how churches work, and that is when we would be preacher-less, we were a stronger community. People were willing to fill the pulpit. There was more money in the kitty every time we met. Because for some reason, in faith communities and in church, very much of our opinion is based on the preacher person, it seems. And, I think those of us in here may defy that because we have looked past that the church is not the preacher person. But for many people, in my experience, the church is the preacher person. And if you don't like her or him, then you sure as hell aren't going to give any money. It's not rocket science, is it? And if you like that person, then she or he doesn't do anything wrong, right? Even though we say, well, but no, it's because we like her. She can do anything she wants to. So it's very odd. But we went through that numerous times. I served on the board over there, served as a treasurer. Some of the folks in the room here have worshiped in those spaces. And we did move on to Peace Haven, which was a really good transition for us. Why would you say it was a good transition, Craig? What did it introduce us to?
A Baptist church. It was accepting the gay people.
That was accepting, okay. Some of the folks in here today are still members there. What else happened in Peace Haven who did we meet and what did we learn about?
Oh, we met Dr. Carroll. Wonderful Dr. Carroll who introduced us to interfaith attorneys. Yay!
To Interfaith Winston-Salem, John Carroll, and a couple of you may remember that name. He was a divinity school student and has remained a good friend of ours, and was a paid person at Peace Haven, and introduced some different opportunities to learn some things about interfaith. And that's kind of what sparked. There again, would we have gone had it not been for John? Because we liked John, we had been visiting with John. It's hard to know, isn't it? Had it just been something that was put in the Sunday announcements and it was done by somebody, would we have gone? Who knows, right? But that whole personal aspect, right? Oh, okay. That whole personal aspect, right? Michelle invites me to come to something, and then all of a sudden it's like, Oh, well, I do it out of respect for Michelle, even though I really don't know what it's about or whatever. And so I go, and then I go, oh, that was really cool beans, and then I want to learn more about it. And certainly that's why we are the people who do church, right? And so that was our introduction to interfaith Winston-Salem and the whole notion of interfaith. From there, we moved to Parkway United Church of Christ, which is where we are today. We've been there
Yay.
2.5 years, a little over 2.5 years, and we're very involved there. We really like Parkway, don't we? We like the philosophy of the United Church of Christ. To be perfectly honest, I struggle with how they do communion. And as a born and raised Catholic, I'm sorry, there are some real rules about communion, and they be messing with them. It's not pretty. And so I have to bite my tongue many times. One of the things that Peace Haven did, I don't know, ladies, you could address whether they still do, which of course I personally loved. Peace Haven did not do communion every week, every time you met, but it was available. It was over in on a separate little table, and you could participate on your own. After all, you don't need an army to do it. And so you could do that, and I loved that. And that was very meaningful to me, because if you know anything about the Catholic Church, homilies are supposed to be 7 minutes, okay? So talk to your preacher people about that, 7 minutes. If you can't say it in 7 minutes, it's not worth saying.
Turn off your microphone.
And that came from my cousin, Father Bernard, a priest. He said, I spend 7 minutes. That's it. If it's a little less, that's fine too. Because in the Catholic tradition, there are lots of other things that are just as important, if not more so, than whatever you have to say. Okay, honey, okay, let's save that for a little bit. One of the things that helped us to explore as well, and this goes back to MCC, and we're coming up on almost time for questions, is small group discussions. It's kind of that same concept of if you invite me, I may participate. We had some very good, maybe beginnings of thinking outside the box while we were still at MCC. And those were small groups, and what they were called, it doesn't really matter. But you gathered together on an evening. And I remember one of the most powerful for me was a video series. I want to say it's called The Secret, but that's not necessarily right. I didn't look it up. It's the whole notion of the universe. And is it called Secret? Okay, Rob. And it's the notion that what you send out into the universe is what you get back. The universe does not understand negativity. So if you send out negative, it doesn't know. I don't get no blah, blah, blah. Okay, I don't get no headaches in the morning. You're sending out a negative, so what you're going to get back is a headache, because the universe doesn't understand the negative. It's really interesting for those of you who have it. It's a DVD. You can watch it in 15-minute little snippets type of stuff. But that's an example of a wonderful opportunity for us to talk and to explore and not feel threatened. And also not like what I did to my mother, and that is threaten her. Because that's really kind of what I did. I put her in a very difficult position where she felt that what she had believed for the last 80 years had no validity. And that's challenging. So it's wonderful to meet in little groups and have those conversations. So, Craig wants to tell you.
Michelle Voss Roberts, where are you?
I'm over here.
We got some news for you, Michelle Voss Roberts.
Okay.
Dr. Carol and Casey are pregnant, due in May. Yay!
And of course, Michelle being one of the divinity school professors, and she knows the family that we're talking about. So, I'm sure that anything else that I have written down can be dealt with. So questions, comments,
Answers.
smart remarks.
Michael,
Bob?
I really have two, but I'll do them separately. But for Craig, you know, I think all of us are impressed with the way you handled this situation after your accident, that you didn't say, why me, you know, why was I selected to have this? What gave you the strength to not take that in?
Hang on. Bob's asking what gave Craig the strength to be able to say, okay, this is my journey.
I think what gave me the strength was I have, so far in my lifetime, I have seen three things. One was one of the nurses at the hospital. I seen her glasses. I seen her pick her hair, and I described what she looked like. She goes, "Oh my God!" I don't know if it was a light or it was nighttime. I remember that. But I saw her. I saw one of my sisters at the airport before we flew away one time, and I saw a puppy that totally like, Michael, something's moving. It's so fast. I saw him one time, so that gets me straight. I can see one day again. Yay.
Okay. Did you get most of it? Bob?
And the other question is for you, Michael. I know just as a physician, how much stress chronic illness can do. A child with diabetes, cystic fibrosis, a brain tumor, what, and yet you remain together. You know, that really separates so many couples. What gave you the strength?
I don't know. I don't know.
I know.
I guess maybe, maybe I was just blessed with that it was my time to support, to
Low?
love. I grew up with a tremendous work ethic, and that certainly didn't hurt. And I don't know.
My time to answer. Michael used to come to, like you said, Wednesday night he would come to the hospital. He would sing to me in my coma, and people would say my blood pressure and everything would go down and everything. I was all calm. I don't remember any of it, but I remember he told me that he used to sing to me. That's what got me through it.
And indeed, I mean, there's that we know that people who are comatose, people who they still can hear. Because even as people are dying, or whatever terminology you want to use, that's the last thing to go. They can still hear, but even when everything else is pretty well shot. So, I don't know, Bob. Thoughts? Kim?
I have one question that comes from a very selfish place. So I'll confess that. You know, your leadership here and that you've given to Journeys as a part of the interfaith programs has been just phenomenal. And I think all the lives of the people who are here today and who have been here throughout the last couple of years have turned that has been fine. So I'll ask this question. You're not going to lead this group anymore. Are you going to keep coming? Will you be here?
Absolutely. We'll be here on Sunday mornings. I mean, God willing, and you know that we're not ill, and that we've been coming even when we were ill. Now we don't have to. But absolutely, we plan to participate, just not have the work.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, we have already been asked. It was about 2 months ago by our faith community to become involved in one of the teams. You know, we don't do committees anymore because we're not Baptist. And we thought about it. We really did, because we have said that we even would like to do more with church, but we said no, because we said we don't even know what it feels like to give up one thing. We don't even know what that feels like because it hasn't happened yet. And so we need to get rid of one thing first. And please don't, I said get rid of, but you understand what I mean. We need to downsize one thing first. And you know, it's interesting because of Interfaith. I'm a certified trainer at work now, and I participate with a state mandated by our business de-escalation training. And one of the things that we talk about in that curriculum is having a balanced life and how important that is. And I share with the group that prior to Craig's accident, I worked between 100 and 110 hours a week. That was my standard work week. Because if you're going to be a teacher and you're going to do 5 main stage shows on the high school level, big shows, okay, and have a competitive speech team and a theater troupe, you have to put in lots of hours. And that's what I did. Prior to Craig's accident, I worked. That was it. And so since that time, since the accident, and since coming here, and since exploring Interfaith Winston-Salem, yeah, we've done this. We've been in charge of this now for a few years. We lead the team, a team that serves at the Bethesda Center every month. Craig continues to be one of the top fundraisers for the American Heart Association every fall, and many of you contribute to that. And that takes a lot of our time and takes a lot of energy. We have now become part of a fundraising team for AIDS Care Service. And so we're doing a Dining for Friends. And so some of you have participated in that. Last year was our inaugural, and we're planning to do it again. We also do things at our church. As we have choir members here, we're involved with that. We sing in the choir. We work with our sister church to do 2 joint services each year, one at Christmas and one at Easter. We are in charge of fellowship, so we bring treats, and we're a sanctuary guild, which means we're people who help with just the basic things that get people in the door and programs and da-da-da-da-da. And we've started another committee there, not we, but the church has, called Welcomers. So once a month, we're outside at the door, greeting people, making sure that, and it seems like every Sunday we do it, we're doing something special, and there's hard place to find parking. And so it's like, no, okay, got room for 4, so we're doing all sorts of things. So I think we're doing enough. But it's nice to do different things for different organizations. Why not?
Thanks to you people, I have raised $3,412 for American Heart Association this year. Thank you, thank you.
The transition to interfaith thinking probably was a lot easier for someone like myself, because I have fought from young life for women to be acknowledged and for terminology. I have not said fireman for so many years, and inclusive language has been part of my life for decades. And I probably go out of my way, and I have people say, how do you manage to say those words? Because it seems so foreign to say that the postal person came or whatever. And it's like, well, you have to be aware. You have to be cognizant. If you're always going to put a man at the end of everything, then you're never going to change. And so the whole notion that God, supreme being, whatever, isn't necessarily one sex or any sex or one name. The groundwork was laid many years ago as I started to fight for equality in that regard. One of the things Craig and I talked about yesterday was, you notice we didn't speak of our fathers in the upbringing. And do you want to tell them what we talked about, the reason that we think maybe our dads weren't very involved?
We think our dads weren't involved because my father was an alcoholic, and he drank up all the money, so we didn't have much. We were very poor. Very poor. Michael thought he was poor until he met me. Then, oh boy, I thought I was poor.
It's all relative, isn't it? My dad was an alcoholic as well. But I can't help but wonder whether church had no meaning for these men because it had no meaning. And I wonder how many people go through life, and maybe that's why we struggle to get people in the door, because they say, it has no meaning. I don't know what you people are talking about. I don't understand it. And then you're going to read from do to who? And it's like, what? You know? And you're talking all this gibberish, and he had 47 wives, and they walked 40 days, and it's like, what the? You know, people, it has no meaning because we can't grab onto any portion of it. And therefore, and of course, we're of an age where our parental units, it was pretty much, you know, the mother was the strong force, and especially in both of our families. And so one can't help but wonder whether that's why our dads, they went to, I mean, mine went to church begrudgingly, sang in the choir begrudgingly, was probably a greater source of stress for my mother and the rest of the choir members than anything else, because it was always that attitude. But, you know, there was always that thing above you that says, well, if I don't go this, I'm going to hell. So, you know, you have to wonder. So, questions, comments, Carolyn?
Michael, how long have you guys been together?
Well, actually, that ties nicely into Bob's question before in many ways. We met on Memorial Day of 2001, which meant we knew each other and had been dating for 3 months before Craig's accident on September 1st.
So I remember he looked like a little bit. Help me out, what do you look like now?
A lot older.
You're still handsome, Craig.
Oh, we paid her. So, we did have a Holy Union. That was, Craig thought it would be good to have it on my birthday. So that was October 6th of 2007. We did do a Holy Union. And we used the Enrichment Center. Many of you know where, some of you were there. And it was hotter than blazes. Oh,
In October, imagine.
yeah. We chose fall because it was going to be nice and cool. Right. So, Drea.
Michael, on behalf of Interfaith Winston-Salem, we want to thank you guys for everything you've done to help in the name of interfaith and just for showing us love and what it can look like and what it feels like. Thank you.
It's a
Merry Christmas.
We have a couple minutes. Let's see. Here, pull on this. There you go, pull. Okay. It's tied. It is tied.
Sybil did a good job.
I didn't wrap that.
This time Sybil can't take credit.
Come on.
There it is. It's come loose. Yeah, because what if it's breakable? That's always my concern. Is it tape? Oh, there we go.
I got my hand open. Oh,
It's pottery.
oh.
Thank you. It's a salsa bowl.
Oh.
Oh, how beautiful.
Give me a shower. Come on, we got some good.
Just name the name, we did it great.
Thank you. Some of you know that we love Seagrove. And go regularly.
We got Ronnie at present too, but she's not here today, so we'll have to give it to her next month.
Here's your microphone. We only have a couple minutes. Anybody have a question?
Yeah.
Or a comment? Mitzi?
How did both of you deal with
you know, you, because it obviously does cause the non-involvement and the non-support.
You have an
Sometimes
answer on that?
downright mean.
Okay, how do we deal with the alcoholism?
I think I was scared to death of my father because he would beat us just to beat us, you know. You did something wrong, so I beat you. Like, I would stay away from him.
When he was drinking?
You know, when he was drinking, he
When
was
he
a
wasn't
totally
drinking?
different person. Like, oh my God, between night and day, like, just calm, relaxed. But when he was drunk, you would stay away. You go hide, you could do something. Because you just know, stay away.
So it was just someone that you couldn't count on because it depended on his drink.
Yeah.
And he died of a massive heart attack at 64. Craig was 16, and there were still children younger.
Yeah. They're both buried at the Fellowship Baptist Church, side by side, mom and dad.
How about you, Mike?
I had a miserable relationship with my dad until I was probably in my 30s. I'd have to do the math, it doesn't really matter. When I guess I finally had the revelation that he was what he was who he was, and I have to wonder too how much of my opinion of my dad was slanted by my mother, for whom I had great respect and great love and admiration, and that could have been very negative as well. And again, it is what it is. You know, she had perhaps reached her boiling point and was using almost me against. I was a latecomer too, so my siblings, I was the last one and home alone for many years. And I don't know. My mother firmly believed that we messed up, we being the adult children, because we were supposed to have taken Dad and had him dried out. And because for one of my sisters-in-law, that's what the adult children did with her dad. But I think we probably all realized that evidently my sister-in-law's dad was ready
Yeah.
and mine wasn't. So we could have hauled him there and hauled him back again next week, until you decide you're gonna move on. You probably aren't gonna move on. So, there are two quick things, and we're wrapping up here. Two quick things. Each year, if you wanna call it an infatuation, that's fine. My love of the Catholic Church remains. And every year, we talk about going to Holy Thursday, Good Friday, Holy Saturday, midnight mass, and we don't do it. And I wonder if maybe that's a good thing, because maybe that needs to stay a memory. Because there's no way that it probably would be a disappointment, because it wouldn't be what I remember. And that's okay. There was something that women religious belonging to the Order of St. Francis in Little Falls, Minnesota, had a wonderful, I thought this was really cool. What we know is that doing for someone is not the same as caring for that person. Caring is a gift that is offered freely from the heart. A wise woman once said that people do not necessarily remember what you did for them. What they will remember, she said, is whether you love them. Thank you, folks. Thank you much.
Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
Michael, you should have gone to, as your Catholic experience, the interfaith Thanksgiving service at St. Leo's. It was absolutely brilliant, really. So put that on your calendar for next year. I know that St. Leo's will be hosting it, but it was brilliant.
Thank you.